Valerie Bertinelli thought she was untouchable. For nearly a decade, she had become one of the most beloved faces on the Food Network, carrying hit shows, winning awards, building something genuinely real with her audience. She believed loyalty still meant something in television. Then it all ended with a single message. No phone call. No meeting. Just a cold text that slammed the door shut on an entire chapter of her career. To understand why that hurt so much, you have to go back to where Valerie Bertinelli came from, because this story starts long before any kitchen, any camera, and any cooking show. She was born in 1960 in Wilmington, Delaware, into a family that never stayed in one place for long. Her father's career at General Motors kept them moving: Michigan, Louisiana, Oklahoma City, then finally Los Angeles, city after city before she even turned 10. That kind of childhood either breaks a kid or builds something tough inside them. In Bertinelli's case, it built both. The family was Catholic, close-knit, grounded in values that would later show up in everything she put on screen. At just 15 years old, she landed the role of Barbara Cooper on the sitcom One Day at a Time. 2 Golden Globe Awards followed. That kind of recognition at that age is extraordinary by any measure. And the warmth she brought to that character planted the foundation of how audiences would connect with her for the next 5 decades. Adult roles came steadily after that: Touched by an Angel, Hot in Cleveland, a Screen Actors Guild nomination, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Long before she ever touched a spatula on television, Valerie Bertinelli had already built a career that most performers would consider complete. But here's the thing: the cooking world wasn't a desperate second act. It was a genuine passion that found an enormous audience at exactly the right moment. And what she built at the Food Network was something most people didn't fully appreciate until it was gone. She joined the network in 2015, launching Valerie's Home Cooking. The concept was simple and entirely real. She cooked food from her actual life, shared stories about family and memory, and treated the audience the way a trusted friend would treat a guest at their kitchen table. No performance. No theatrics. Just warmth, stories, and real food. The show ran for 14 seasons. That length is not an accident. Audiences don't return week after week for 14 years unless something real is happening on screen. In the same year, she joined Kids Baking Championship alongside cake artist Duff Goldman, bringing exactly the kind of patient, emotionally intelligent hosting that the show demanded. 2 Daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Culinary Host followed. Then more shows in 2019. And in 2018, the Food Network signed her to a multi-series exclusive deal, essentially declaring that Bertinelli was not just a host, but a cornerstone of their entire identity. That deal would later become the center of everything. Because what happened to it is where the real story begins, and it starts with a corporate earthquake that almost nobody outside of boardrooms fully understood. On April 8, 2022, Discovery Incorporated completed a merger with Warner Media to form Warner Bros. Discovery, one of the largest media conglomerates in the world. On paper, it made business sense. 2 major companies combining resources, cutting costs, positioning to compete with Netflix. In practice, it meant one very specific thing for every single person at every single channel under that combined umbrella. Contracts were about to be scrutinized at a level they never had been before, and overhead was about to be cut aggressively. The executives who had shaped the Food Network's identity over the previous decade, the people who had championed talent like Bertinelli, who understood what those relationships meant to audiences, were among the first to leave during the restructuring. And when the leadership that built a vision walks out the door, the people who represented that vision become vulnerable immediately. Bertinelli's multi-series deal, originally signed in 2018, had been extended by 1 year under the old regime. That extension ran out in 2022, directly coinciding with new leadership that had no particular investment in the deals the previous team had made. The timing was not a coincidence. And the direction the network was heading had been building for years before the merger accelerated everything. The Food Network launched in 1993 with one clear purpose: teaching people how to cook. 30-minute meals, Good Eats, Barefoot Contessa, shows built on trust, knowledge, and personalities audiences came back to because they left each episode knowing more than when they started. That model gradually gave way to competition programming. Chopped, Beat Bobby Flay, endless baking championships, cheaper to produce, faster to generate ratings, easier to replicate. The educational cooking show required real investment. The competition show required a kitchen, a timer, and mystery ingredients. By 2022 and 2023, longtime viewers and former hosts were all saying the same thing: The network that once taught the country how to cook had become a channel of endless competition and repetitive drama. Bertinelli herself said it publicly in April 2024, responding to a food blogger on Threads who had lamented the shift. She agreed. The golden era was over, and the cancellation of her show was the most concrete proof available. But while all of that industry machinery was grinding forward, Bertinelli was privately living through something that made everything feel even heavier. And what she was managing behind the scenes during those filming months is genuinely staggering. In October 2020, Eddie Van Halen, the legendary rock musician and Bertinelli's first husband, died at 65 after a long battle with cancer. They had divorced in 2007 after 26 years of marriage, but the bond between them had remained. Bertinelli described the grief as both devastating and complicated, because the relationship had evolved into a deep friendship by the time he was gone. Then her second marriage fell apart. She and financial planner Tom Vitale had married in 2011, but separation was filed in November 2021, and divorce proceedings dragged through 2022. Bertinelli described the marriage as toxic, a word that carries real weight when applied to a decade-long partnership. The divorce was finalized in November 2022. She called that day publicly the second best day of her life. That one sentence tells you everything about how damaging it had become. And through all of it, the grief, the divorce proceedings, the emotional wreckage of that period, Bertinelli was filming seasons of Kids Baking Championship with warmth, patience, and genuine care for the children on screen. The audience watching those seasons had no idea what was happening behind them. Then, before the pain had even fully settled, the news about her contract arrived in the worst possible way. In January 2024, Bertinelli confirmed publicly what had happened at the end of 2022. The Food Network had not called. No meeting was requested. No conversation happened between her and network leadership about the future. The confirmation that she would not be returning to Kids Baking Championship arrived through a third party, communicated via text message. For someone who had spent nearly a decade as a cornerstone of that network, who had won 2 Daytime Emmy Awards for the channel, who had hosted a show that ran for 14 seasons, the method of communication said something beyond the contract decision itself. It communicated exactly how much the institution valued the relationship that had been built. Bertinelli posted an Instagram video on January 20th, 2024, addressing the situation with complete honesty. She acknowledged the business reality, budget cuts, new corporate structure, the logic of it all. She also acknowledged the hurt, without apology, because the hurt was real and she had no interest in pretending otherwise. Celebrity support arrived immediately. Fans who had watched 14 seasons flooded comment sections with frustration. And that response revealed something important that most coverage of this story never quite reached. The audience wasn't upset about a cancelled show. They were grieving something genuine that had become part of their routine. Bertinelli represented a specific kind of television relationship that the post-merger Food Network had decided to deprioritize. The parasocial warmth of educational cooking content built around a trusted, consistent personality over many years. Competition shows generate spikes of engagement around drama and elimination. Educational cooking shows with warm hosts build deep habitual loyalty. Viewers don't just watch, they organize their schedules around them, reference the recipes years later, feel a genuine connection to the person in the kitchen. The new Food Network was essentially trading that deep loyalty for cheaper content and easier short-term metrics. That's a legitimate business decision in a difficult media environment. But the cost was measured in exactly the kind of audience trust that Bertinelli had spent nearly a decade building. Budget cuts explain the mechanism. Corporate strategy explains the direction. Neither one explains what was actually lost. And what happened after the exit showed that Bertinelli was not finished building at all. By March 2024, just 2 months after the Food Network confirmation, she announced a new relationship. No name, no details, just gratitude and happiness. For a woman who had publicly described losing the ability to trust anyone romantically during the Vitale divorce, that announcement carried real emotional weight. A new cookbook called Indulge was announced alongside a tour. Offers from other platforms were referenced as being evaluated. The streaming and social media landscape in 2024 offered more options for culinary creators than had ever existed before. YouTube channels with millions of subscribers, flexible streaming deals, direct audience content where the relationship between creator and viewer is closer and more immediate than broadcast television ever allowed. Here's the thing that matters most in all of this. The fans who had watched 14 seasons of Valerie's home cooking were never attached to the Food Network. They were attached to Bertinelli. That distinction is enormous. The institution made a business decision. The audience made a loyalty decision. Those two decisions pointed in very different directions, and that gap is exactly why this story matters beyond one personality's contract dispute. What Bertinelli's exit made visible was the human cost of an industry-wide shift. Behind the contract numbers and budget spreadsheets was a woman who filmed seasons of television during the worst personal period of her life because the work mattered to her and to the people watching. The institution responded to that commitment with a text message through a third party. The audience responded with grief, frustration, and loyalty that no corporate restructuring could manufacture or replace. No institution owns a relationship built through genuine warmth and consistent presence. That relationship belongs to the person who built it. Valerie Bertinelli entered 2024 with a finalized divorce, a new relationship, a new cookbook, and a departure from the network that had defined a decade of her professional life. The audience built during those years was real, loyal, and portable. And the next chapter was already being built, inside the exact gap between what institutions decide and what audiences actually feel. The Food Network moved on. The audience did not. And that, in the end, says everything.